guys, how's it going? Welcome to my algorithm tutorial. My name is Steven, and I'm going to show you how to solve the longest palindrome substring problem. It is problem number 5 on LeetCode. It is a medium difficulty question and is very popular in technical interview questions. Let's check it out. Given a string S, find the longest palindromic substring in S. You may assume that the maximum length is up to 1,000. So their example here, BABAD, the output is BAB, and also ABA is also accepted because they're both of the same length. Let's check out example 2, CBBD. The output is both of the B's because that's the longest palindrome in that string. Well, let's first break down this problem on the whiteboard and see if we can come up with some good ways to approach this problem. Okay, so there's some vocabulary that we must understand first. A palindrome is a word that spells the same thing when it's spelled backwards. So, mom, when spelled backwards, it's the same word. And also, a substring is a continuous string of letters within the string. So if mom is our string, M by itself is a substring, MO is a substring, and also the full string itself can be considered a substring. Things that would not be are like MM because they're not continuous. You can't just jump over. So if we want to return the longest substring, we'll have to find out if a substring is a palindrome, and then check if it's longer than the current longest substring we have. So it's a good idea to note that we'll keep track of a current longest substring. In this case, we'll just call it longest. At first, we could say our longest is just the first letter. If nothing beats this, this will be returned. I'm using a pre-built method here called Substring, and it takes in 2 parameters. We have to first be familiar with this method before we use it, so let's talk about this for a second. Substring takes in 2 parameters, the first one being the index that you want to start at, and the second one being the index that you want to end at, not including it. So it would just be B would be returned as longest. We will have to at least iterate through every character, so a for loop will take some time. The brute force way of solving this is by keeping track of the first letter of each substring and the last letter of each substring, and then using a while loop to iterate through a substring to confirm it's a palindrome. But that costs n to the power of 3 time, and that's very inefficient, so let's avoid going that route. This will take some critical thinking, but not too much, which is why this question is seen so many times in interviews. We just need to analyze some patterns about palindromes and then write out a method for distinguishing if a string is a palindrome or not. Palindromes are words that, if you fold them in half, it's a mirror image of itself at the midpoint. In other words, the first and last characters are equal, then the 2 letters a step closer to that are equal, and so on and so forth. But if there are an odd number of letters, then the middle letter will be alone. So let's take this into consideration as well. This way is efficient because it only keeps on checking as long as the letters are mirrored reflections, and quits checking as soon as the pair of letters aren't equal. So what we want to do is start from a center, and then branch out and check the next elements if they're equal to each other, and then branch out from there and if they're equal to each other. And if we've reached some out of bounds limits, then to break out of our coding block. And also over here too is out of bounds. So we will say while beginning is greater than or equal to 0 and end is less than s.length, and sBegin is equal to sEnd. That is saying that as long as we're in our boundaries of S, and as long as the index, these are indices from our string, so it's bringing out elements here, if these elements are equal to each other. So at first it'll be, is B equal to B? Yes. And then is A equal, well, this will go outside of our So our outer bounds conditions will break out of the while loop first, especially for the first and last letters of the string. So a more general approach would be to start from the middle. Is B equal to B? Yes. Then to go out, is A equal to A? Yes. And so how are we going to move from this element over to here and over to here? We'll say beginning is going to be minus minus and N will be plus plus. So these will keep on branching out until this condition isn't met or any of these conditions aren't met. We'll be left with a beginning and an end variable of where we want it to be, or actually just outside where we want it to be, because it's going to check if D is equal to B, and that's when our while loop is going to break. So we want to return the palindrome, our beginning index pointing to one step below, and our ending index pointing to one step above where we want it to be. Okay, so I'm going to try to fit in this little space over here, but our return value is going to be a substring of the starting with the index before. So right now our beginning index is equal to 0 and our ending index is equal to 4. But we want to return the index starting at 1 and ending at 3. This can be simply done by using the substring method that I showed you previously. To show you what it looks like, we would return s.substring. So our return value is going to be s.substring. Since it includes the beginning index, we'll do beginning plus 1 and end. Because end doesn't include end, it actually includes everything up to end. So, okay, so this is good for when we're checking for this B spot right here, but what happens when we want to check for this A spot and this B spot? And all the other ones. Those are all possibilities and combinations of substrings that our string is going to have. So simply, it's really just an iteration. Let me clear up some space here. Okay, so if we have our string, and just like how we did for the center one, we have our indices. We branched out for this one. We want to do the same for this one, the same for this one, but really we're going to do it for all of them. We're going to go for this one and branch out until we go out of bounds. We're going to do it for this one and branch out until there's no palindrome or we're out of bounds. And then the same for this one. Use a different color here. And check all of them for their potential palindromes. This is the for loop that I was talking about in the beginning. We're going to use a for loop starting at the beginning and going till the end. I will be the variable that we pass into our while loop that initializes our spreading out. The final part of the logic in our algorithm will be to check up against the length. When we return a value from our expand function, we can just take the length and compare it to the length of the current longest palindrome. When our for loop is over, we'll have the longest palindrome stored and just return that value. I think we have whiteboarded enough here. Let's go to our editor and type this out. So let's get in here. So first edge case we want to take care of is if our string is just one character or no characters. So we'll say if s.length is less than 2, then we'll just return s. So then we'll initialize our variable longest to be the first character of our string. Start at the 0th index and end at the first index, not including it. Then we'll initialize our for loop, which will go through every single character in our string. Then we'll initialize our substring that we find using our. Then in here is where we'll use our helper function, and we'll take in the string and I, and also I will be the beginning, and then the second I will be the end. Then we'll compare the lengths. Then we'll take the case where our string is odd letters. I guess, yeah, in this case, we'll take the case where the string is even letters. So beginning will begin at I, and I will start out at the one next to it, and we'll kind of branch out from there. So then we'll check the lengths here as well. return the longest. So let's construct our helper method. So we'll have, we'll be taking our parameters, then we'll return the palindrome that we get back and compare that with the lengths afterwards. Then we'll just return our substring that we get that is a palindrome. Alright, let's see if this works. Accepted. Let's try another test case. Alright, and let's submit it. And it worked. Cool. Alright, so let's go over another example and make sure that this is clear. Okay, let's go through an example just to make sure everything is clear. So, longest starts out as just being C, and we go into our for loop where I is 0. And the first thing we do is we say temp is equal to whatever our helper method gives back to us. So let's go into that. Beginning is 0 and end is 0. So while beginning is greater or equal to 0 and end is less than the length, which is true, and also s begin and s end are equal to the same thing, then we'll say beginning minus minus and end plus plus. Now beginning goes out of bounds, and that'll break our while loop. So then our for loop will increment I by 1, and beginning and end will become something different. So let's go back to our helper method. Beginning will be I, and end will be I, which is 1. Beginning will be 1, and end will be 1. So we, in our string, are right here. S begin is equal to B, S end is equal to B. And these are equal. So begin minus minus, and begin and end plus plus. So begin minus minus and end plus plus. So minus minus will be 0, and plus plus will be 2. So now we're checking the C and the B. Is C equal to B? No. So we'll break out of our while loop and return the substring that is one more than the beginning right here and up to our ending, which is right here. So we'll return B, and then we're going to check the length. Is the length greater than the length of what we currently have, which is C? And it's not. So C remains our longest substring at this point. But then we have to use our other helper method, which takes the case of even length palindromes. Let's try that out. Do some erasing here. Try not to mess it up too much. So our other helper method, while our for loop is still has I set to 1, we'll set beginning to 1 and end to I plus 1, which is 2. And then we check, is S at the beginning index equal to S at the end index? Yes. So then beginning minus minus will give us 0, and ending plus plus will give us 3. And we'll check again. We're at 0 and 3. So is C equal to D? No. So we return and break out of our while loop. So now at this point what we return is beginning plus plus, which is the first index up to here, and up to the ending index, which is right there at B. So is the length of this substring longer than our current longest? Yes. So now longest equals BB. And we can go through the rest of this, but we know already that this is the longest substring. All the other ones won't work, and this is what we return. I hope this makes sense to you. It takes a little bit of going over and over again, but this way does work, as you can see. I hope this helped you understand how to solve this problem. Thanks for watching. Comment below for any suggestions or questions. See you next time.